Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, 12b of Maseches Kiddushin. We are about 12 lines from the bottom of the page. The first word on the line is va'afilu. The last word on the line is hahu. That's where we're starting from. The Gemara says, Hahu gavra de kaddish b'tzifta da'asa. There was a man who was mekadesh, he betrothed a woman using a sifta da'asa, which Rashi tells us is machatzares shalhadas, a kind of mat made of myrtle reeds. This mat apparently, though, was worth very little. It's worth less than a pruta. So after he was mekadesh her with it, amruleh, the people who observed this, they said to him, "Hales bashav a pruta." That's not worth a pruta, and it's not kiddushin. So Amar lahu, he said to them, Tikdosh ba'arba zuzi de ispa. Let her be betrothed with the 4 zuz that were tucked into the mat. This wasn't just a mat. There was money actually hidden within the reeds of the mat. Shakalta ve'ishtika. She took it and she was silent. She kept the money. She didn't throw it away. And she kept it. So the question is that Kiddushin? Because at the end of the day, there was more than a Shava Pruta here, although at the time that he gave it to her, she wasn't aware of that. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava said, Havashtikusa de la'achar matamos. This situation is silence after the money was given, meaning that apparently Rava is saying, if he gives her it and he says, here's 4 zuz, and she takes it and she's silent, that's an acceptance. That's an acceptance of the Kiddushin. She doesn't have to say, I accept. She just has to accept it. But here, she didn't know the money was there. The silent acceptance was after the money was actually given. So Rava says, meaning not immediately after, but a length of time after. It wasn't simultaneous. It was a separate event. That which she was silent, it was separate from the giving of the money. So Rava says that's shtikusa de la'achar matamos. That's being silent later, after the giving of the money. V'chol shtikusa de la'achar matamos lav klumhi. And silence after the giving of the money is nothing. Silent acceptance, where there's a time lapse between the giving of the money and the actual silent acceptance, is nothing. That's not called silent acceptance. Rashi explains the reason is because when she originally accepted the money, or the mat, she didn't even know the money was there. So now she finds out, and she doesn't say anything. She doesn't say yes, she doesn't say no, she's just silent. He says it's not Kiddushin, because we interpret her silence not to being acceptance of Kiddushin, but rather we interpret her silence to mean that she thinks, she's assuming that, listen, I never took this as Kiddushin. He gave it to me, he didn't tell me this was here. And I never meant when I accepted it originally, I never accepted it for Kiddushin. And now when I'm keeping it, I'm not keeping it for Kiddushin. That was never the plan here. This is not how I accepted it originally, and I don't see it as Kiddushin. That's how we interpret it. If at the time that he gave it to her, she knew about it, she knew he was giving it to her for Kiddushin, and she was silent, then we will interpret that as an acceptance of the Kiddushin. But here, where there was this time lapse, so we interpret her keeping of it as she's saying to herself, listen, I never assumed this to be Kiddushin. He didn't give it to me with that intent, or with stating such an intent, and that's not when I accepted it. I didn't accept it with that intent, and so now also it's not Kiddushin. It has to be that I accepted it with the intent for Kiddushin. That's at least what she thinks, and that's really what matters, is that she's not keeping it with the intent of it being Kiddushin, so it's not Kiddushin. That's what Rava said. So Amar Rava Amina Aminala. Rava said, where do I get this from? How can I prove this? The Tanya from the following brisa. The brisa says, Amar la kans yisela zu b'pikadon. If a man says to a woman, take this sela, take this money, more than a pruta, sela, take it and take it as a pikadon. A pikadon is that he's entrusting her to watch it. So he's asking her to watch his money for him. So then he says, actually, please accept it for Kiddushin. So the Brisa says, Bishas matan ma'os mikudeshes. If he changed his mind at the time that he gave the money, so right away, or as he's giving the money, so then, if she accepts it, it's Kiddushin. But la'achar matan ma'os, if he only changed his mind later, after he had already given it. Originally he said, take this to watch it. I'm entrusting this to you to watch it. And she said, okay. And she took it, and she now has it in her possession. And then he says, actually, you can have it for Kiddushin, but it's already after the Matan Mos, the money's already been given. So then the Brisa says, Ratzta Nikudeshes. If she wants it, so then it's Kiddushin. Lo Ratzta Eina Nikudeshes. If she doesn't want it, then it's not Kiddushin. So what do we mean if she wants it and if she doesn't want it? So Rava elaborates. He says, "Mai ratzta umai lo ratzta." What does the Brisa mean when it says if she wants it, it's Kiddushin. If she doesn't want it, it's not Kiddushin. Ilema ratzta de amra in, lo ratzta de amra lo. If you tell me that ratzta, that she wants it, means where she says that she wants it. She says, yes, I accept it for Kiddushin. And a lo ratzta, and I don't want it, is where she expresses that she doesn't want it. She says, no, I don't want it. Michlal de reishos, that would imply that in the first case was where he says it at the time of the giving of the money. If when he gives her the pikadon, he's giving it to her, he's entrusting her to watch it, then at that moment he changes his mind and says that it's Kiddushin. So we will infer that Michal de Reisha, in that case, Ki Amra Lo, that even in the case where she says no, she doesn't want it, Nami Havu Kiddushin, it would also be Kiddushin. And Amayim, why would that be? Ka Amra Lo. She said no, why would it be Kiddushin? In other words, if you look at the Brisa says, if he gave it at the time of Matan, if he changed his mind and said it should be Kiddushin at the time that he gave the money, then it's Kiddushin. It says that without any qualifications. If it was at the time of the Kiddushin, of the giving of the money, then it is Kiddushin. If it was only afterwards that he changed his mind, it says, so then it depends. If she wants it, it's not Kiddushin. If she doesn't want it, if she wants it, it is Kiddushin. If she doesn't want it, it's not Kiddushin. So what does that mean? So we're saying maybe it means that she wants it means that she says, yes, I want it to be Kiddushin, then it's Kiddushin. And she doesn't want it means she says, no, I don't want it to be Kiddushin. But the implication is that in the first case, either way, it doesn't matter. There's no qualifications. Whether she says yes, whether she says no, it would be Kiddushin. Gemara says that doesn't make sense. If she says no, then it's not Kiddushin. She's not accepting it. So it can't be that Ratzta means yes and Lo Ratzta means no, because that wouldn't make sense going back to the first case of Shas Matan Mos, where we say that it is Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, Ella, second line on Yud Gimel Amar Aleph, on 13a, Ella Lav, so rather isn't this the correct explanation? Ratzta de Amra, and it must be that Ratzta, she wants it, is where she says yes, that's where she wants it. Lo Ratzta, and what does it mean she doesn't want it? De Shtika Meshaska, it's where she's silent. We don't mean when we say she doesn't want it that she expresses explicitly she doesn't want it. We mean that she's silent. That's the only way to understand the Brisa. And then the Brisa can make sense. The Brisa would be saying, if he changed his mind, Bishas Matan Mos, while he was giving the money, so then whether she says yes or whether she's silent, it's Kiddushin. Because it was at the time of the giving the money. If it was only afterwards, so then if she says yes and she acknowledges that she's still accepting Kiddushin, then it's Kiddushin. But if Lo Ratzta, if she doesn't want, meaning she doesn't express that she wants, she just is silent, so then it's not Kiddushin. Why? Says Rava, you see, because it's la'achar matan mos, because it's after, it's only later, and we don't interpret her silence to being acceptance of Kiddushin when it only comes later. So Rava says, that's how I know, that's my proof from this Brisa, that shtika la'achar matan mos, being quiet, a silent accept, or silence after, if it's after a time lapse between the giving of the money and the silence, that her realization that this is either that the money's there or that where he changed his mind and says it should be for Kiddushin. Shtika at that point, silence at that point, is not interpreted as an acceptance. Gemara goes on, it says, so it says, V'shma mina, we learn from here, Shtika d'lachar matan mos lo klum hi. We learn from this brisa that being silent after the money is given is nothing. It's not considering acceptance if it's after there's been a time lapse. Gemara says, Kashu ba b'fum nahara, there was in this place, Pum Nahara, they raised a difficulty with this proof that Rava brings. Mishmei de Rav Huna bre de Rav Yoshua. The question was brought in the name of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua. And the question was, Mi dami, can you really compare those two cases? Our case, where the money is hidden in the mat, in the myrtle mat. Can we compare that to the case where he originally gave it to her to watch, and then changed his mind that it should be Kiddushin? Are those comparable? Hasam b'taras pikadon yavinu nihala. In the case of the brisa, where he gives it to her to watch, he gave it to her originally to watch it, as a guard. Savra, and she thinks, Ishadina lahu, if I don't keep it, if I give it back, if I toss it back, umisbari, and it breaks, or some change this to misavdi, or it gets lost. There may be a difference. Michayavna bahu. She thinks now I'm going to be responsible for it, because he gave it to me to watch. He entrusted me to watch it. But here, bitoras kiddushin yahivnu nihala. But here he originally gave it to me for kiddushin. If she didn't want it, lishdinu, she should just toss it away. So the question that they're raising is that you can't bring a proof from the silence in the case of the pikadon, of where she's been entrusted to watch it, to silence in the case of the mat. In the case of the pikadon, so he gave it to her to watch. And now he says, actually, I want it to be Kiddushin. So she's holding this thing. She's responsible for it. She agreed to watch it. So what's she supposed to do? If she says, oh, no, I don't want Kiddushin, and she throws it back, I mean, really, she should just say she doesn't want it, but that's not what she did, right? She's thinking in her head, if I throw it back to him, well, then if something happens to it, if it breaks or it gets lost, I'm responsible, because I agreed to watch it. So what does she do? So she's silent. She just, I guess she's like stuck. She holds on to it. So they said there, we understand that shtika, that silence is not an acceptance. But in the case of Rava, it's a different case. In that case, he gave her the mat as Kiddushin. He gave her the whole thing. She never agreed that she would be a watch person over it. So now where he says, and actually, by the way, there's money that you didn't realize is there, and I want it to be Kiddushin, and she's silent. So they say there, we should interpret her silence as acceptance, because if she didn't want it, she should give it back. Because there's no fear that she's going to be somehow responsible for it. She never accepted to watch it. So that was the challenge that they raised against Rava's proof from the case of the Pikadon. And they said, you don't really have a proof that that shtika, that silence after a time lapse, after the giving of the money, would not be an acceptance in our case. Perhaps it is an acceptance in our case. So the Gemara says, Pareth Rabachai. Rabachai challenged that refutation. He refuted that question. And he said, Atu kulu nashi dina gemiri. Do all women know all the halachos? Does she know the details of the laws of what her responsibility is? Hachanami, even in the case of the Kiddushin, Savra, she thinks, Ishadina lahu, if I send it back to him, umetavri, and it breaks, mischayavna b'achar yusayu. I would be responsible for the damages. And the truth is, I'm not sure why she wouldn't be. We had an earlier Gemara that expressed that. But it seems that the Gemara seems to be saying that she wouldn't be, but the Gemara is saying that she wouldn't necessarily know that. And so when she keeps it, she could be thinking the same thing. It's not so much about what's the actual halacha of whether she's responsible. The important point is interpreting her silence. Is her silence an acceptance of Kiddushin? Well, the Rav Achai is saying it shouldn't be. Because even if she would not be responsible, if she would throw it back and something would happen to it, but she doesn't know that. So when she keeps it, she's not keeping it because she's accepting the Kiddushin. She's keeping it because she doesn't know what to do with it. If she's afraid that if she rejects it and gives it back, throws it back, she's going to be responsible if something happens to it. So she's silent and she holds on to it, but that's not because she's accepting the Kiddushin. That's because she doesn't know what to do with it. That's what Rav Achai said back, and he says indeed he thinks that Rava has a good proof from the case of the Pikadon, the case where she's silent after he changes his mind about whether originally he says to watch it, now he says it should be Kiddushin. She's silent. There we said if there was a time lapse, it's not Kiddushin. Rava has a proof from there that shtika, that silence after a lapse of time between the giving of the money and the silence would not be interpreted as an acceptance of the Kiddushin. The Gemara continues and it says, Shalcha Rav Acha bar Rav l'kamei de Ravina. Rav Acha, the son of Rav, sent to Ravina. Ki agavna mai. He said, what's going to be the halacha in this case? What do we say about shtika de la'achar matan mos? What do we say about a case like this where she's silent after a time lapse of accepting the money? So Shalach lei, Ravina sent back to Rav Acha, Anan lo shmiya lan had Rav Huna braid Rav Yoshua. He said, we never heard of this challenge to Rava's proof. We always assumed that Rava's proof was a good proof, and we say that silence is not considered a acceptance. It's lav kum, the silence is nothing. That's what we always assumed. That's what in our place. That's how we do it. But atum, he says, but you dishmiya lechu, but you heard of this challenge to the proof. He says you chushula, you should be choshish, you should be concerned that it's a good challenge, and you should treat this kiddushin like a possible kiddushin and require a get. You should require a get because it might be kiddushin, because it could be that Rava's proof from the Pikadon case is not actually a good proof, and over here in the case of this machatzalet, this mat of myrtle where the money was hidden, it could be that there it's different, and there the silence is interpreted as an acceptance of kiddushin. So Ravina said, you who know of this challenge, you should be choshesh. You should be concerned for this for that challenge to the proof, and you should be concerned that maybe in fact it is kiddushin and require a get. It's interesting. It would seem, I would think, that Rav Huna now has also heard of it, and he should also start to be Ravina now has also heard of the challenge, and he should also be concerned. But the Gemara implies that for some reason it wouldn't apply to him, but I'm not sure why not. It would seem that from this point forward, he's aware of the challenge to the proof, unless he accepts the rejection, the refutation of the challenge. But he's not telling Rav Acha to accept the refutation. He's saying you have to be choshish, you have to be concerned for the challenge, and be concerned in Rava's case that maybe it is kiddushin. The Gemara goes on and says, there was a woman who was selling varshachi. What are varshachi? So they are silk bundles. So she was selling these bundles of silk. Asa'u Gavra, a man came along, Chataf varshacha mina. He grabbed one from her. He seemingly was stealing it. He grabbed it away from her. Amrale, she said to him, Havani Hali. She said, give it back. What are you doing? Amarla, he said to her, Iyahivna lech mikadesh esli. If I give it to you, will you be betrothed to me with it? So he stole her silk. He then wants to use it to marry her. I don't know why she would ever want to marry him, but that was what he wanted to do. maybe this is like romantic or something, right? So he grabs the bundle, he steals it from her, and she says, give it back. He says, only if you're going to be mekudeshes to me, if you'll be betrothed to me with it. Shakatia veishtika. She took it and she was silent. She didn't say that she accepted it. So what's the halacha here? So here it's actually b'shas matamos. It was when he gave it to her. He said, I'm giving it back to you, but only if you accept it for Kiddushin. And she accepted it, but she didn't say anything. So is that Kiddushin? V'amar Rav Nachman said, Yecholo l'meimar, she's able to say, in the shakli, it's true, I took it, v'didi shakli, but I took what was mine. I took what was mine, and it's now I'm not accepting Kiddushin from it. It's mine. That was Rav Nachman's ruling. Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava raised a contradiction from a brisa on Rav Nachman. The brisa says, Kitsha begezel, if a man betroths a woman with gezel is something he stole openly from someone, uvechamas, or he betroths her with something that he extorted from someone. Basically, he paid for it, but he forced the person to accept money. It was here's the money, I'm taking this. That's called chamas. Uvigneva, or with gneva. Gneva is something he stole secretly from someone. O shechataf sela miyada, or he grabbed money from her and was mekadesh her with it, which is basically our case. The brisa says mikudeshes. The brisa says she is mikudeshes in all of those cases. If she accepts it. If she accepts it, then it's mikudeshes. Says Rava to Rav Nachman, it seems that in this case, where he grabbed the silk and gave it to her and she accepted it, it should be Kiddushin. That's what the brisa basically says. So Rav Nachman answered, or the Gemara answers, Hasam b'dishadich. Now there was different. There was a shidduch. They were set up. It was arranged between them, between their parents, whatever it was. But it was prearranged that they should marry her. In the case that they should marry each other, she had already agreed to be mekudeshes to him. So then, when he gives her this thing, whatever it is, stolen goods or something that he just grabbed from her, so she already had said that she was going to agree to be betrothed to him. So that's where we say that it's Kiddushin. But over here, in our case, there was no prearrangement. He just walked up to her in the market, took her stuff, and tried to give it back to her for Kiddushin. She took it because she wanted her stuff back, but that's not Kiddushin. Umina Tamra, says Rav Nachman, how do I know? Where can I prove this from? Dishani lan ben shadach u'delo shadach. How do I know there's a difference between when it was prearranged and when it wasn't prearranged? I'll prove it. Ditanya, because we have a brisa. The brisa says, Amarla kansi selazu shani chayev lechi. The brisa says that if a man says, take this sela that I owe you, v'chazar v'amarla hiskachi libo, but then he says, actually, I want it to be Kiddushin. So first he's saying he's using it to pay her back, and then he's saying, actually, I want it to be Kiddushin. So the brisa says, b'shas matam ma'os, if it's at the time that he gives the money, so then, ratzta mekudeshes, if she wants it to be Kiddushin, then it's Kiddushin. Lo ratzta eina mekudeshes. If she doesn't want it, then it's not Kiddushin. La'achar matamos, if he only decided later that he wanted it to be Kiddushin, he paid her back the money he owed, and then he said, actually, I want that to be Kiddushin, then the Gemara says, the brisa says, afilu ratzta eina mekudeshes. Even if she wants it to be Kiddushin, it's not. She already accepted it for the payment that he owed her, it can't now be the Kiddushin. The Gemara says again, like we had earlier, my ratzta umay lo ratzta. What does it mean if she wanted it, if she didn't want it? How did she express whether she wanted it or not? Ilema ratzta de amra in. If you tell me again, like we said earlier, that ratzta means she said I want it, lo ratzta de amra lo, and I don't want it means she expressed no, I don't want it. So then, the implication would be ha'ishtika, but if she was silent, havu kiddushin, then it would be kiddushin. That would be the implication. So if that's true, V'nisni mikudeshes stam. So then let the brisa just say that she is mikudeshes without going into details. Ki hasam, like it did in the other brisa. In other words, in the other brisa that we brought previously, with the case of the pikadon. So over there, the brisa said that if he gives her a sela, and then he says immediately at the time of matamos, when he's giving it to her, he says, "I want you to watch it," but then he says, "Actually, I want it to be kiddushin." So then the brisa just said mikudeshes. It's kiddushin. And it didn't go into the details of ratzta, lo ratzta. It's kiddushin because it is, unless she says no, which is obvious. If she says no, obviously it's not kiddushin. But if she doesn't say no, meaning if she's silent, or if she says yes, then it is kiddushin. That's how we learned that brisa. So here the brisa says, our brisa now says, if he gives her a sela originally for paying her back, he owes her money, he wants to give her the money that he owes her, and then he says, it's kiddushin, actually I want it to be kiddushin. So it says that at the time, if it's at the time that he's giving the money, that he changes his mind, so then if she accepts it, it's kiddushin. If she doesn't accept it, it's not kiddushin. So what does that mean? If it means if she says yes, it's kiddushin, if she says no, it's not kiddushin, and if she's silent, it's also kiddushin, so just say, mikudeshes. You don't have to tell me if she wants it or if she doesn't want it. If she doesn't want it, it means she says no, then you don't have to tell me that. Of course, if she says no, it's not kiddushin. So what does it mean if she wants it, if she doesn't want it? It can't mean, by if she doesn't want it, it can't mean that she says no. That's obvious. So the Gemara says, Ella, so rather, ratzta means, when it says that she wants it, it must mean to amra in. She says yes, then it's kiddushin. Lo ratzta, she doesn't want it, is di-shtika, is where she's silent. In other words, a man goes over to a woman and says, I owe you money, here it is, I'm paying you back. And then he says, actually, I want it to be kiddushin. So the Bryce is telling you, if she says yes, ratzta, she says that she wants it, yes, then it's kiddushin. Lo ratzta, but if she doesn't express that she wants it to be kiddushin, rather she's silent, so then it's not kiddushin. That's what the Bryce is telling us. It's not kiddushin, rather she's accepting it, as he originally said, to pay her back. The katanya deina mikudeshes, right? And it says that if she's silent, it's not kiddushin. My time, and the question is, why? Why is it not kiddushin? Because yichol meimar in shakli v'didi shakli, because she can say, I'm taking what's mine. You owe me money. I'm taking what's mine. I'm not taking this as kiddushin. I'm taking it because you owe me money. So just like we had in the case of the market where he grabs the silk and he gives it back to her and she's silent. So there also she's allowed to say, Rav Nachman said she's allowed to say, you're right, I'm taking it, but it's mine that I'm taking. Oh, but then you'll ask, but we have a contradiction from the case where he was mekadesh her with something stolen, or something extorted, or something stolen secretly, or shechatav sela miyada v'kidsha, or where she grabbed a sela from her and was mekadesh her with it, where we say mikudeshes. There we say she is mikudeshes. So putting aside Rav Nachman's case of the silk, we have a contradiction of two brisas. These authoritative texts. We have one brisa that says, if he grabs something from her and gives it to her, it's kiddushin. And she can't say, no, I was just taking it because it's mine. On the other hand, we have the brisa we're learning now, which says that if he was paying her back, and then changed his mind and said, actually I want it to be kiddushin, and she accepted it but was silent, it's not kiddushin, because she can say, I just meant I was taking what's mine. So how come? So we have a contradiction. One case says he grabs something from her and gives it to her, it's kiddushin. One case says he tries to pay her back what's hers, and she's silent, it's not kiddushin. So says the Gemara, so what do we see? How do we resolve the contradiction? So it's clear, elalav shma mina. So we have to resolve this contradiction in the brisas. How do we resolve it? So what do we learn? We learn from here, hadeshadech Ha de lo shadich. That one must be talking of, there must be this distinction. There must be a distinction between shadich and lo shadich, of whether there was a shidduch, a prearrangement, or not a prearrangement. If they had already arranged this marriage, they had either, again, between the man and the woman, or the families, whatever it was, and then he goes over to her, he grabs her thing, and then he gives it to her as Kiddushin. So there, the Brisa said it's Kiddushin. That's because they had arranged this marriage already. So we view her acceptance as an acceptance of Kiddushin. But in the case where he owed her money, and he went over to her, and he tried to pay her back, and then he's like, actually, I want it to be Kiddushin, and she took it silently, there the Brisa says it's not Kiddushin. That's because there was no prearrangement, and she could say, I'm taking it as a payment because you owe me money. I'm taking what's mine. And says Rav Nachman, the same is true in our case, where he goes over to her in the market, grabs the silk, and gives it to her as Kiddushin, and she's silent. Rav Nachman said that it's not Kiddushin because she could say, I'm taking what's mine. You grabbed this from me, I'm just taking it back. And the reason why she's allowed to say that is because we're talking about a case where there was no arrangement between them in advance that they would do Kiddushin, that they would get married. But if there was, then it's true. In Achanami, we would interpret her silence as an acceptance of the Kiddushin. Okay, we'll hold here. We are going to take a 2-week break for Pesach, and we'll resume the Sunday that follows Pesach. Have a Chag Kosher Sameach. Thank you for participating. See you soon.